Hello, my name is Arshia and I am from MSRIT. My topic for today is Informatica. So, Informatica is nothing but an ETL tool. It is also called a data warehouse tool. So, in order to understand Informatica, we will first see what is data warehouse and what is ETL. So we'll now move to what exactly is a data warehouse. So what is data warehousing? In general, warehouse is nothing but a place where goods are physically stocked to facilitate smooth flow of the business. So in layman's word, data warehouse is a read-only database which copies and stores data from transactional database. Now the difference between transactional and read-only database is that transactional database keeps on updating. That is, for example, air ticket booking or railway ticket booking make use of transactional databases because data keeps on updating. Now suppose an analyst wants to analyze all the data, so he has to make use of read-only database because transactional database, in the transactional database data has already been updated, whereas in read-only database data does not get frequently updated. So data warehouse is a read-only database, and data in a data warehouse is there from a historical point of view. So this is called a data warehouse. So it will copy data from multiple sources. There are not single source, there are multiple sources, and each every source is transactional database. Next we'll go to a process in data warehouse that is called ETL process. So ETL basically stands for extract, transform and load. Extraction basically means extracting data from multiple sources. That is, here the source are nothing but it can either be a file, a transactional database, XML file, Excel file, or any file. So it extracts data from the transactional database, transform it according to the business logic. For example, inserting or deleting particular column, or formatting or changing it to uppercase, lowercase, all these transformation according to business logic. So T stands for transformation. Next, finally, we go to L part of the ETL, that is nothing but load. Loading the transformed data into the data warehouse or a data mart for analysis purpose. So this is called the ETL process. Informatica follows this process, so that's why it's called ETL tool. I'll now walk you through how exactly to download and install Informatica. Informatica is not an open source tool. You need to have the license. Now I'll just show you how to download Informatica. So just go to Google and type e-delivery. Click and then choose the first link, that is Oracle Software Delivery Cloud. This is where you download Informatica from. Just click on this. Once you click on that, it will ask you to sign in or register. I've already registered, so I'll just sign in. We'll enter the credentials and you sign in. It asks for 2 checkboxes, that accept the license agreement, accept the export restrictions, just check on it and click continue. Now this page shows 2 drop down. The first drop down basically is nothing but the product pack. So Oracle Business Intelligence is the one you need to select. Next one is, so the next drop down is a platform. The platform you'll be working with. So mine is Windows 32-bit. I'll just select that. There are multiple options here. You can either have Linux or Windows 64-bit, Oracle Solaris, or anything. Just click continue. Next, you'll be provided with 4 options. Just select the second one, that is Oracle Business Intelligence 11G for Windows 32-bit, and we'll continue. Now you'll see 4 parts. This is Oracle Business Intelligence Data Warehouse Administration Console 11G and Informatica Power Center. So there are basically 4 parts, that is part 1 of 4, part 2 of 4, part 3 of 4 and part 4 of 4. So you need to download all the 3 parts. So we'll start downloading. So download first part, then we'll download the second part, the third part, and finally the fourth part. We'll wait for all these 4 parts to be downloaded. Once it is downloaded, we'll then move to how exactly to use Informatica. Like we'll create mappings and see how exactly Informatica works. So after downloading and installing Informatica, we'll now go through how to create our first mappings. So following are some of the Power Center tools components. These are the 4 important Power Center tool components, that is the Designer, Workflow Manager, Workflow Monitor, and Repository Manager. Designer basically is used for creating the mappings. Mappings is nothing but an ETL, where E is your source, T is the transformation, and L is loading the data into your targets. This is where you actually code your logic to transform data into the targets. You can't run mappings on your own. To run mappings, you need a session. A session is a place where you actually tell the Power Center about your source and target details. For example, whether your source or target is a file or a database and where exactly it is located. So workflow is the combination of one or more sessions. So workflow manager and monitor basically is used to monitor your workflow and also used for validation. Then there is repository manager that is mainly used for administrators. So we'll now start with actually how to create your first mapping. So go to start and select Power Center Informatica, the correct version. Under client you'll get Power Center Designer. Click on Power Center Designer. Connect to the appropriate repository. So for development purpose, the repository name can either be development repository or dev repository. In this case it's devbox. Give in your username and password and click connect. Once you click on connect, you can see multiple sections. So this is the first section where you have multiple folders, inside one of which I'll create the mappings. The second section, this is actually where your mapping will show up, and this is the third section that mostly used for transformation. It will show you all the transformations. So I'll choose this particular folder for creating the mapping. So you can either double click, or another way of doing it or connecting to the folder is right click and open. Once you connect to the particular folder, you can see the following options. This is nothing but the mapping designer. Actually you will map your source and target, and this is your source analyzer. This is actually where analyze your source, that is E part of your ETL. Next we'll go to, this is the target designer. This is mostly for loading your data into the targets. So we'll now create the source, that is the E part of the ETL. We go to sources, and as you can see we have multiple options, either to import from a database, a file, COBOL file or XML definition. So in this video I'll be importing the source from a file. So click on it, select the file type as all the files. You'll get the list of all the files. So the file I'll be using for this purpose is Boston Customers. So click on the file and you'll see a checkbox saying import field names from the file. So check that checkbox. This is basically to get your header line, that is your customer ID, last name, first name and all. Next, I'll be using a default text length, that is 256. Once you're done with that, click next and then click finish. So we got the source, that is the E part of the ETL. Just to remind you, ETL is extract, transform and load, and the E part is right here. Next we'll go to transform and load. So for load, we need to go to the target designer, that is this, in order to load the data into target designer. The simplest way of doing this is go to the sources, and the source that we created, just drag and drop it into the target designer. This is the easiest method to create the target. I've done this because the target definition is exactly the same as the source definition. So here we have the target definition. Next we'll go to the mapping designer to create the mapping between the source and the target. So we'll just drag and drop the source into the mapping designer. So before doing that, we should rename the mapping. That is, we should give it a meaningful name. In this case, I'll give it as m_standardized customer data. So it should be understandable. Once you give the mapping a new name, click on OK. As you can see, you have two parts. For this purpose, we'll just minimize the first part, and this will act as your source definition. So this particular source definition has a lot of flexibility in terms of, for example, you can override the SQL queries, use multiple filters and all that. But this applies only to if your source is a database. Whereas in this case, we have imported the source from a file, so we will not go into this. Once you get to source, the next thing is the transformation, that is the T part. We got the E part from the ETL. Next we'll go to T part, that is the transformation part. So that we can do it using, so in this case we are using expression transformations. So as you can see, there is an icon here for the expression transformation. You can either double click on that and you'll get the expression transformation here, or another way of doing it is go to transformation and click on create. Once you click on create, you get an option drop down. So click on expression, as you need an expression transformation, and give it a meaningful name. For example, I give as exp_transform. Once you're done with that, you get your expression transformation. Next, you have your source definition. You can click on Shift N or drag and drop every item in your source into your expression transformation. So just drag and drop it here. You can minimize your source definition, and this is your transformation. The next thing is target, that is to load your data into the target. This is L part of your ETL. So to do that, we go to targets, we double click on the target. Here you can rename your target. So as you can see, you have a last name, first name, gender and everything. So we'll transform this. So we'll go and click on the last name, copy and paste it. So as you can see, we got another exactly similar column that we'll rename it as O_last name. This will be your output port. So we'll make this last name as input port and this as your output port. So we'll check the box for the output port. So as you can see, there are three ports: input port, output port and the variable port. Input port is something, it means that the thing that gets into your transformation, that is in this case it's expression transformation. An output port means the column that are going outside your transformation. So your O dot last name is your we given as an output port because it's going outside the expression transformation. So just click on O underscore last name. So here in this case we'll give it as upper and last name, and we click on OK. So your last name, the column last name acts as your input port, and upper last name acts as your output port. We do the exactly same thing for the first name. Copy and paste. We'll get first name 1, exactly similar column, check it as input port, the second exactly same column as an output port and make it as upper first name. Exactly same thing we do it for the gender, copy paste another column. So once we have created the exactly similar column for the gender, we'll make first gender as an input port and the second one as an output port. So we'll now transform the gender. We'll just click on genders. We'll now write a simple if-then clause. So the way we do it in Informatica is, if gender is equal to M, we'll output male. Else, if gender is equal to F, we'll output female, or the else part is unknown. If it's not even M or F, we'll output unknown. So let's just go back and see the file. As you can see, in the genders we have male, female, unknown, M, UNK. We've just covered F and M. So if the gender is F, we'll output female, and if the gender is M, we'll output male. Whereas if it's male or woman or unknown, it will output unknown. So we haven't covered these cases. So if it's woman, we have to output female. If it's UNK, we'll output unknown. So we'll cover all these cases in our if-then statement. So if gender is equal to woman, we'll output female. So if it's either of F or woman, we'll output female. Similarly for male, if it's M, or if gender is equal to man, we'll output male. Now we just go back to the file. As you can see, we have camel casing over here. We have male. So we haven't covered this case in our if-then clause. So what we do is, we'll just convert our gender into upper. So when it reads from a file, it will convert it into upper and it will compare it with M or man. So that problem will be resolved. So we'll do that for each and every gender. Assign upper. So if gender is equal to M or it's man, we'll output male. We have even covered the male part. If gender is equal to F or woman or female, we'll output female, or if anything else, we'll output unknown. We'll click on validate and click OK. So once you're done with that, we'll get the target. We'll map each and every appropriate output port to the target. Once we are done with this, we'll now create sessions and workflows. So once the mapping is created, the mapping cannot run on its own. We need a session in order to run the mapping. A session is basically a place where you tell the power center about the source and the target details, and also where they are located. And workflow is nothing but a collection of one or more sessions. So at this point, we can save a repository or your mapping at any point of time. So to do that, we can just go to repository and click on save, or else you can also do Ctrl S. So after doing this, we can now go to how to create sessions and workflows. So we'll go to the mapping designer. We can create the session right from the mapping designer. Just right click on the mapping designer and click on generate workflow. hit next, and then again hit next. So as you can see here, the workflow will be prefixed by WF, whereas the session will be prefixed by S. So this is a standard naming convention for workflow and sessions. So just click next and finish. So now the workflow along with the session is created. To see that, we go to the workflow manager, which is right here at the left. Click on the workflow manager. So this workflow manager basically consists of many sections. So this section will hold your folders and this will hold your workflow. So just drag and drop your workflow, whatever you've created. So this entire thing is your workflow and this particular thing is your session. So we'll just double click on the sessions and go to mapping. Under mapping we go to the source. Here just we scroll down and we give the source file directory to the place where source file is saved. We just go back to where file is stored, just copy paste the path and paste it here. So our source file is basically in the C drive, so just give the path. So session just tells the power center where exactly your source file is located. Similarly, we go to targets and then we go back, we give the file directory name, which is again in the C drive. We just give the location where the target file is located. In target we also need to specify the header, so we'll go to header options and we'll go output field names. So when you click on this basically means to give the first line as a header line, that is first row as your header line. So we just click OK and finish. Now once the workflow is created, we'll start the workflow. Just right click and start the workflow, but before doing that we'll see how it is running. So we'll go to workflow monitor, double click on the repository dev box and then go back and start the workflow. So this was a workflow. As you can see, it's written failed. So we'll go and check what was the error. So just right click and get session log to see the error. Here we'll click on severity to get the errors. So all the errors will be displayed on the top. The topmost rows will display the what kind of error it was. So here the error was the process cannot access the file because it is being used by another process. So the error basically occurred because the file is already open somewhere. So we go back and close the file. Just close this file and we'll run the workflow session again. That is, go to workflow, right click and start workflow. So this time, as you can see, it succeeded. There was no error. So all the 15 rows were applied and this is how the session was created. Now we'll go back to where our target is created. So as you can see, this TGT, so this was a target that is created once we started the workflow. So we'll click on that and see the first header, the first row is your header. And in the gender, as you can see, we have transformed everything, that is male, female, unknown, everything is caps, and all the camel casing male has been replaced by male, M has been replaced by male, woman has been replaced by female. So everything is transformed. You can also right click on the mapping designer and select arrange all iconic. So once you click on that, your entire mapping will be shown as an icon. So if your mapping is really long, you can just right click and just arrange it as icons. So this is how you create your mappings, sessions and workflows. Okay, now I will go walk you through the overview of ETL and Power Center, that is Informatica Power Center. So as I said before, ETL is nothing but extract, transform and load. That is extracting data from multiple sources, and your sources are mainly the transactional databases, and transforming them according to the business logic and then loading into the appropriate database. So you can either extract data from a database or from files, XML file or anything, as I've shown previously. So Informatica follows this ETL process. It's an ETL tool. So I'll just walk you through the overview. Go to Start in All Programs. Select the appropriate version of Informatica, that is 9.5.1 for this purpose. Go to Client. Under Client you'll see multiple options. For example, Power Center Designer, Power Center Manager, Workflow Manager and Workflow Monitor. You can either start the Workflow Manager or the Workflow Monitor from here itself, or in the Power Center Designer you can directly click the icon called Workflow Manager, Workflow Monitor. Also you have a developer client, that is nothing but the IDE. So we won't look into it. We'll go to the Power Center client. So just click on the Power Center client, and under that you have the Power Center Designer. Click on it and now go to OK. Click on OK and connect to the appropriate repository. So as I said before, for the development purpose it's basically dev or devbox or this _dev. So just go and connect to the appropriate repository, give your username and password and hit connect. So once you connect, you will see multiple options or multiple sections. This is your mapping designer and these are your folders. So this is just a brief overview how your mapping takes place. This is the final data table where you actually load your data. This is where all the transformation is taking place, and this is the actual data. That's your source target, and this is your transformation. So this is the E part, T part and L part of your ETL. So as you can see in the transformation, there are O_last name, O_first name. So that is nothing but acts as the output port, and these are uppercase. So and here are multiple icons. Here this stands for Workflow Manager, and this is a Workflow Monitor that will just monitor your workflow. And another way, you can either start the Workflow Manager and Monitor from here, or you can go back to your all programs and the Informatica client. You can start it from here. So let's start your Workflow Monitor. Click OK. So this is your workflow. This entire thing is called a workflow, and this is a session. As I said before, a mapping cannot run without a session. You need to create a particular session. So this exactly is your session. Now to the Workflow Manager, we'll go to the Workflow Monitor. So we'll go and click on this icon. So it's loading. Once it's loaded, just hit OK. So let's go back to a mapping overview of the mapping and see how exactly we have done the transformations. So we'll just go to the O_last name, just click here and see as O_last name. O basically stands for the output port. So output port is something that is going out. So that's called output port of the transformation, that is going out of the transformation. So I've checked the output port. This is input port and the output port, and this is the variant port. So I've checked the output port and it's saying uppercase last name. So the last name is your input. So input to the transformation, and it will whenever it finds a last name, it converts into uppercase. That goes out of your transformation. Same applies for first name. Similarly for this, there's a column called state, that is the 16th column in your table in the file that I'm using. So I'm basically reading from a file that is Boston Customer, which is an Excel file. So in that, the 16th column is state. So the output port, I've checked the output port and I've written a query for this. This is how we write if and else in Informatica. So So if is null state, so there are certain cells in that particular column which is empty. So this condition basically checks if it's empty, that is, if it's null, the state is null, just output unknown. Else, if the status is present, that is, just output the uppercase letters. So let's go back and just check the file, how it looks. Just go back here, and here this is my sample file. So as you can see, the last name and the first name, everything is in camel casing. So the output basically will just convert everything into upper, transform it into upper, and load it into the table. Similarly for the state, you can see there are some cells which are empty, so it will just output unknown, and anything which is in lowercase will convert it into the uppercase. It will be transformed into uppercase because we have written the condition in such a way. So we'll go back. So we'll select star from customers. Now say we have to load everything into the table. So right now in the table, if we run, nothing is loaded because we didn't start the workflow. So what we do is we'll go back to the designer, go back to the workflow manager and just right click and start the workflow. Once you start the workflow, now we need to see it. So we go back to the monitor to monitor it and see that it has been succeeded. Another way of doing this, just right click and start the workflow. If you want to see more details, you can just click this particular arrow and see out of 21,415 rows, all the rows have been affected and none of the rows have been rejected. This means all the rows have been copied into the tables. So we'll go back and just select star from customer, hit run, and yeah. So you can see all data has now been loaded, and the last name and the first name, as you can see, everything is in uppercase, has been transformed to uppercase. We'll just truncate the table to just see another way of how to start the workflow. So we go back here. You can either click on restart task, or another way to just click this and restart. Once you do that, again see it has been succeeded and none of the rows have been rejected, and all the rows have been applied. So this is how this is the brief overview of Informatica, and what we have done is this: we have just mapped a source with a target with appropriate transformations. So this was a brief overview of Informatica. So in this video, basically we learned what is Informatica, what is a data warehouse, what is ETL, how to extract, transform and load data, how to create mapping, workflows and sessions, and how exactly Informatica works. Hope you enjoyed it.